For our entire lives, we've had this one specific way of thinking about intelligence. It's like a mental map we use to sort every mind we come across. But what if that map isn't just a little bit off? What if it's leading us completely astray?
What if it's wrong in the same way that the sun orbits the Earth was wrong? A framework that's so deeply baked into our thinking that it just feels like common sense, but it's actually so broken that it stops us from seeing what's right in front of our faces.
For hundreds of years, that map has basically looked like a ladder. You know this instinctively. It's that old idea of the great chain of being, this single vertical scale of who's got the most cognitive horsepower.
Right at the bottom, you've got your plants and other simple stuff. Then you start climbing up, past the insects, the birds, the mammals, until you get to the absolute tippy top. And who's up there? Well, surprise, surprise. It's us, humans. It feels neat, right? Tidy, intuitive. And it is completely, fundamentally wrong.
To really see just how broken this whole ladder model is, let's look at two fascinatingly different minds. Let's put a crow up against a bat.
So, the crow. This bird is an absolute master of physical problem solving. It uses tools, it can figure out multi-step puzzles, and it even gets concepts from physics like water displacement to get a treat. That's a skill that rivals a 7-year-old human kid. The bat, on the other hand, is doing a totally different kind of magic. It's building a live, 3D model of the world using nothing but sound, creating a sensory reality that we can't even begin to wrap our heads around.
So that old ladder model forces us to ask, which one's smarter? Who gets the higher rung on the ladder? Is it the tool-wielding bird or the sonar-guided mammal? And the answer is, it's the wrong question. It makes absolutely no sense because the crow and the bat aren't in a race for a single spot in a ladder. They are intelligent in profoundly different ways along completely different axes. The question itself is flawed because the model we're using is broken. Okay, so if the ladder is wrong, what's the right model? Well, we need to throw out the one-dimensional ladder and replace it with a multi-dimensional landscape. Let's call it the capability space. This analogy just makes it all so clear. Think about it. You would never ask if a food is just good. Of course not. You'd ask how it's good. Is the flavor good? Is the nutrition good? Is it prepared well? Well, using a single word like intelligence for a mind is just as unhelpful. It squishes a dozen different capabilities into one single, useless label. So instead of that single line going up, I want you to imagine a vast, wide-open space with tons of different dimensions. And every mind, whether it's an animal, a human, or an AI, has its own unique spot in this space, defined by its specific profile of strengths and weaknesses.
This idea isn't totally out of the blue. We actually started moving away from a single IQ score for humans decades ago, thanks to ideas like Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. The real problem is we never bothered to extend that same logic to non-human minds.
Okay, let's take this new map out for a spin. Let's try to plot the coordinates of a few radically different minds.
Let's start with the octopus. It has around 500 million neurons. Now that's about the same as a dog. But, and this is a huge but, it's where those neurons are located that makes the octopus so unbelievably alien. Get this. Two-thirds of its neurons are in its arms. And these arms can think, they can taste, and they can act almost entirely on their own. It's a totally distributed intelligence, a mind built on a completely different blueprint from our own. Now let's plot an AI, and this part is really crucial. An AI isn't just a dumber human on a lower rung of the ladder. No way. It has what you'd call a spiky profile. It's literally superhuman in some areas, like generating text, but it scores near 0 in others, like having any real grounding in the physical world. It lives in a totally different part of the capability space. So, if this map is so much better, why aren't we all using it? Well, the reason is a 400-year-old philosophical trap that's been gatekeeping our entire understanding of the mind. Yup, it all goes back to this guy, René Descartes. With this single famous line, he basically welded the act of thinking to the experience of being, to consciousness. And for centuries, we've just assumed you can't have one without the other. But what if we just pull them apart? What if we defined thinking simply as a process, transforming input into output? And being? Well, that's an experience, a subjective internal feeling.
One is something a system does. The other is something it feels. They don't have to be the same thing. Because here's the trap. If we demand proof of consciousness before we're even willing to study a mind, we will never, ever get started. We can't even prove consciousness in other humans, let alone in AI. It's an impossible entrance exam that has completely paralyzed the science of artificial minds. So what's the path forward? We need to change our job description. We need to stop acting like consciousness gatekeepers and start acting like cartographers. Our task is to map what these systems can do, not to sit around guessing what they might feel.
This really calls for a new science. Let's call it synthetic ethology. Ethology is a study of animal behavior. And just like ethologists stopped asking if animals have souls and started observing what they actually do, we need to do the exact same thing for AI. We have to focus on observable, measurable behavior.
And we can even adapt a powerful toolkit straight from biology, Tinbergen's 4 questions, to guide us. These questions about how it works, how it developed, what its purpose is, these are all empirical, answerable questions. They allow us to map AI's place in the capability space without getting lost in philosophical quicksand. And this new map has huge practical consequences. It helps us tackle all those tricky ethical questions much more effectively. Instead of asking the unanswerable question, is it conscious? We can ask answerable ones like, does it have the capacity for preference, or can it suffer? This lets us have a much smarter, more nuanced, and way more productive conversation. So this leaves us with this central question of our entire explainer, and it's one I want you to really think about. Can a system think without being? Can a system show all the functional behaviors we call thinking without having any of the internal subjective experience we call being? The answer might just redefine not only AI, but ourselves.